And I'm really disappointed, guys. One of the most critical characters of the original Ghostbusters didn't make it into this one. No, I'm not talking about Rick Moranis or Harold Ramis. I'm talking about the blowjob ghost. Hey there, and welcome to Post Credits with Gil Garcia, where we go beyond the final scene of the latest nostalgia bait blockbusters. Today's subject is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the follow-up to 2021's Ghostbusters Afterlife. For those of you keeping score, this is the fifth Ghostbusters film. Well, technically it's the fourth if you disregard the 2016 female reboot. The film reprises the original cast, the recent one, and attempts to carry on the legacy of the franchise between 1984 and 2021. If you haven't watched it already, I've posted a spoiler-free review over on YouTube. If you have the time, I'd appreciate it if you can give the video a watch, a like, and subscribe to the channel. I've been grinding away at providing some content over these past couple months and would like to see some traction form on social media and over on the channel itself. Just search for Post Credits with Gil Garcia on YouTube to find the official page. The link will also be posted in the description of this podcast episode, so you don't have to look far for it. Before we get into the spoiler-filled review of Frozen Empire, let's take a look ahead at the next couple episodes on the channel. April will have a whopping 5 podcast episodes, the most of any month since I started the show back in July of last year. To start the month, we move on from one empire to another. On April 2nd, we have Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. After that, on April 9th, we have a smaller film that I wouldn't expect to get a lot of interest, but it's certainly one that is getting buzz with cinephiles. That is Dev Patel's Monkey Man. The episode after that is very exciting. It's an episode that I've been brainstorming for quite a while, and although I'm not a weed smoker, there are plenty of stoner films to talk about. So on April 16th, I'll be doing a special 420 episode discussing the best and worst stoner flicks. April 23rd is another episode I'm extremely excited to talk about, as we get to talk about Alex Garland's new film, Civil War. Those around me know how much I love Alex Garland. From writing Dread to Annihilation and Devs, I've been a huge fan of his, and I cannot wait to see what Civil War has in store for us. Well, the film, of course, not the increasing hostility in the United States' political climate. Then we finish the month of April strong with Challengers, a film by Luca Guadagnino, acclaimed director of Call Me By Your Name, starring Zendaya. I think April is going to be a banger of a month for the podcast and YouTube channel, and I cannot wait for these last two movies especially. With all that out of the way, let's focus up on the film at hand. This is going to be the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire spoiler-filled review. You have been warned. Now let's get started with Act 1, My Expectations. Now, before we get started on the review, I also want to mention that this podcast may sound a little different. I tried to record on Sunday, but there were thunderstorms here in Los Angeles that prevented the audio from sounding very good. Plus, I was working on the video at the time. Then I procrastinated a little bit and finally got a chance to record today. However, there is some construction going on next door that may affect the way the audio sounds. So forgive me if you hear banging or any other kind of noise from the next room over. It's not my fault. I'm doing my best. I wanted to at least get this episode up before we actually get to next week's episode. So I know this is kind of rushed and it doesn't sound as good as my other podcast, but bear with me. With Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, when the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes an evil force, the Ghostbusters, new and old, must join forces to protect their home and save the world from a second ice age. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is directed by Gil Kenan, and it's written by Gil Kenan as well, director of Monster House and A Boy Called Christmas. It's also written by Jason Reitman, son of Ivan Reitman, who directed Ghostbusters Afterlife, Juno, and Thank You for Smoking. The film stars Paul Rudd as Gary, Carrie Coon as Callie, McKenna Grace as Phoebe, Finn Wolfhard as Trevor, Dan Aykroyd as Ray, Ernie Hudson as Winston, and Kumail Nanjiani as Nadeem. The Ghostbusters is held in high regard as one of the first and only enduring comedy franchises in movie history. From their arrival in 1984, audiences have been captivated by the likes of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and the late, great Harold Ramis. The original films blended a fine mixture of action, comedy, and horror, as well as merchandising, into a cultural phenomenon. As a kid, I remember having toys for the Ecto-1, drinking High Seas Ecto Cooler soft drink, dressing up as a Ghostbuster one Halloween, and owning the soundtracks for the film. By the way, if you're curious what my rendition of Bobby Brown's On Our Own sounds like, just watch the first 20 seconds of the Frozen Empire YouTube video. It took me about 30 tries to get that rap down, memorized and recorded, and I think it came out pretty good. It was a lot of fun to make. If you want to have a laugh, go check that out. These movies were a staple of my childhood. My aunt would bring them over on VHS and we'd watch them constantly while my little brother, who was still a toddler, would watch it. My brother loved Slimer, so my aunt aptly named him Slimer after that. Every time she'd come over, she would ask for him. Now, when they mentioned that 2016's reboot was going to be an all-female cast, I wasn't directly opposed to the idea. I thought that there was a lot of potential there, so long as the cast was right, and that the talent behind the camera was also there. The all-female casting, Paul Feig's involvement, and the blessings of the original cast members seemed like it was enough to make it different from the first two films to give it enough spirit of its own. But boy, was I wrong in being optimistic. 2016's Ghostbusters was a gigantic mistake. It took all the humor and success of Bridesmaids, but ham-fisted and brute-forced their way into a Ghostbusters film that hardly resembled the original. They said that these movies wouldn't get made unless the original actors or creators were involved, yet here they were in 2016 making a film that Bill Murray was even lukewarm about. They delegated on the plot that was going to be more reboot than sequel, with a cast that was sure to stir up the internet. 2016's movie had some talented actors, honestly. I like Kate McKinnon, I like Kristen Wiig, and especially Chris Hemsworth, but the comedy felt like the lowest kind you can get. There was a lot of fart jokes and just Leslie Jones being loud for the sake of it. There was no horror. Hemsworth was a walking punchline. Melissa McCarthy was your stereotypical fat person joke. Leslie Jones's bits felt like she thought the louder you are, the funnier you are. It was a mess, and the audiences almost universally agreed that there wasn't enough juice to warrant a sequel. They almost universally hated this film. But in the most Hollywood way possible, Sony Pictures wanted to take another crack at the Ghostbusters IP on the big screen. Much like Terminator, Alien, RoboCop, etc., some film franchises from the 80s just are not allowed to die. So Ghostbusters Afterlife was greenlit with Jason Reitman, the son of the original director Ivan Reitman, on board to restore balance to the Ghostbusters name. The cast they hired for this one was way more in line with the spirit of the original franchise. Paul Rudd anchored the casting call, with up-and-comers McKenna Grace and Finn Wolfhard rounding out the future of the franchise. The resurrection of Egon Spengler to tie Afterlife to the original film franchise was seen by a lot of people as a cheap gimmick, but for fans of the 1984 and 1989 version, they got me hook, line, and sinker. Reitman and the studio got the blessing from the estate of Harold Ramis to bring the renowned patriarch back to life, and the rest of the original members fell in line. Although they weren't a big part of Afterlife, seeing Hudson, Murray, Aykroyd, and Ramis on screen again was encouraging for where the studio could take future installments. This is what the 2016 film should have been like. I really liked Phoebe, Trevor, and Gary, but I felt like the setting of the Kansas farm was only going to take them so far. The trailer for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire actually excited me because the film was going to take us back to the Big Apple. However, the trailer itself felt a bit boring, bland, and wasn't very funny. We got a similar shot from Afterlife of Phoebe hanging out the side of the Ecto-1 while she's blasting at a ghost. The hook this time, however, was that they were releasing a drone equipped with a ghost trap on it. I love the idea that these Ghostbusters were going to use new equipment on the ghost that we've never seen before. The drone is a creative and natural addition to the arsenal for the team to have, and we'll discuss more of the new gadgets in a bit, but that was enough to pique my interest that they were going to take this movie in a new and exciting direction. It's now time to see if my expectations were met or if they faltered. Next up is Act 2, my spoiler-filled review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. The film opens up to a group of firemen emerging from the famous firehouse set in the early 1900s. They investigate an incident that has occurred at a hotel where the inhabitants of a boardroom have been frozen to death. There's a music box playing to some weird ancient language, and a woman in bronze armor is clutching onto an orb as the last remaining survivor of the attack. The intro establishes the darker tone that this film is returning to, presenting some creepy imagery, including the sight of one of the frozen people crashing into pieces. After the intro establishes the lore of Goraka, the modern-day story picks up not long after the events of Afterlife, where we last saw our new heroes unite with the remaining living Ghostbusters from 1989, Peter, Ray, and Winston. The two groups cross their streams one seemingly final time as they close a spectral portal and defeat Zul once and for all. Some 3 years later, and the entire group has moved into the old Ghostbusters headquarters that is located in the firehouse in downtown Manhattan, where even Podcast has uprooted his life to join the cause. In the newly inhabited firehouse, we see the old ghost chamber, the pole, Egon's old lab coat, newspaper clippings of the attack of the Statue of Liberty, and the Stay Puft Marshmallow miniatures are back. They're pretty annoying in this movie, not gonna lie. Within the first couple minutes of the film, we get our first ghost bust in action as the group springs ahead to capture the Hell's Kitchen sewer dragon. In an attempt to tie back into the original film, the destruction and chaos that Phoebe unleashes on the city captures the attention of Walter Peck, once again played by William Atherton, who was known for being the ecological researcher in the original Ghostbusters film. Peck has become the mayor of New York and is once again trying to shut down the Ghostbusters. I actually don't blame him this time. The proton pack nearly destroys a couple skyscrapers while she is shooting aimlessly at the ghost dragon. It's a fun sequence, and for the audience that is planning to go watch the movie, enjoy it while you can. We won't be seeing much of Phoebe busting any more ghosts throughout the rest of the movie. You see, this movie makes the mistake of taking the proton pack away from our lead heroine in an effort to make her discover how important the responsibility of protecting the city is. Peck argues that her age makes the team responsible for underage labor. I think the trope of seeing a character lose their powers and everything that made them special in the first film in the sequel is pretty frustrating to see so many films go through. We've seen it play out in Spider-Man 2. Bruce Banner can't become the Hulk in Infinity War. Superman gives up his powers in Superman 2, and so on and so forth. This is my biggest issue with the entire plot of Frozen Empire. It predicates on Phoebe doing the absolute wrong things in order to spark the inciting incident. Her journey throughout this entire film is a complete fucking disaster, devolving from a brilliant and reluctant hero into a love-struck, edgy dimwit. Goraka's plan to escape the bronze orb from the opening of the film involves a ghost by the name of Melody, influencing an unsuspecting Ghostbuster into releasing Goraka and the trapped souls in the basement of the Ghostbusters headquarters. The chemistry between Melody and Phoebe is good, don't get me wrong, but when the Ghostbuster relationship transforms into something romantic, it causes some issues narratively with what we've come to learn about Phoebe. Now, sure, every hero makes a bad decision every once in a while, but Phoebe literally endangers all of New York City when she enters a chamber that can extract ghosts from stationary objects. Essentially, Phoebe decides to kill herself for 2 seconds just so she can physically touch Melody in her spectral plane. What the fuck is this? What's the movie trying to say? That it's okay to kill yourself to be with the person you're attracted to? Is Phoebe that incapable of making platonic and romantic relationships with mortal humans that she has to kill herself? What made Phoebe charming and charismatic in Afterlife was her sense of dorkiness. She made cheap dad puns that made the people around her cringe, and they gave her a bit of character and charm. Not only does Frozen Empire make her completely stupid, but they do away with her charming character quirk. She isn't really funny or dorky like she was in Afterlife. This angry teenage angst angle is pretty disappointing. I'm confident that they're probably going to correct it for the third film, and who knows, maybe they'll even give her a girlfriend in the next movie. But for this one, I was very disappointed with what they did with Phoebe. I lightly touched on Kumail Nanjiani in the spoiler-free review video. It's a bit hard to talk about him in this film without divulging into spoiler territory. Like Rick Moranis in Ghostbusters, Kumail plays the role of the Fire Master, a person of important descendants that has protected Goraka's orb for centuries. For some people, it may break the immersion of the film a bit, but the role of the Fire Master is to be capable of controlling fire to defeat Goraka. In the final 15 minutes of the movie, Kumail's Nadim discovers that he holds this superpower and helps the team's victory. My argument for the plot twist is that we have seen supernatural abilities before in this franchise. Hell, possessions, religious prophecies, and we've even seen a painting come to life, for God's sakes. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that Nadim can control fire. So any argument against it, I can easily point to Vigo, the painting coming to life, and be like, well, look at that shit. Kumail's given a lot of good material to work with, a lot more than what he got out of the Eternals especially. So I'm happy that audiences are so welcoming of his presence in this franchise in particular. He was a good addition to the team, and I'll like to see him have more screen time with Paul Rudd in the next movie. I feel like they could have good comedic chemistry together, especially since they both starred in the biggest Marvel flops in studio history. Now, speaking of Paul Rudd, he gets more screen time as an actual Ghostbuster in this movie and gets to drive the Ecto-1. In Afterlife, he was mostly a side character that helped Phoebe with her experiments, who ultimately got possessed by Zool. Here, we see him in the full Ghostbusters outfit, which was a childhood dream of his, and he gets to fire the proton pack. The original cast is largely involved. Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson have a fantastic character arc in this film, which is why I don't find the movie as awful as some people are out to say it is. Their conversations about leaving the ghostbusting business to the younger generation is sadly prophetic. You can tell that these two actors still have a profound love and care for these characters and franchise. This is almost the exact opposite of the feeling that I get from Bill Murray. Much like in the previous two Ghostbusters film, Murray's role in this film is basically just cashing in an appearance fee. He has a pretty funny scene that calls back to the original movie when he interrogates Nadim. Then he disappears throughout the rest of the movie until the final battle. The final battle is completely underwhelming, unfortunately. When we see Murray, Annie Potts, Hudson, Aykroyd, they all come together in costume, they don't do anything with it. They essentially get thrown aside and have to watch as Phoebe and Nadim dispose of Garaka. Garaka is a waste of a cool-looking villain. He only appears in the final 15 minutes of the film, and those minutes compromise of him slowly walking towards the basement of the firehouse. For a villain with the ability to freeze proton packs and create sky beams, he doesn't do jack shit to dispose of the Ghostbusters. The final act ends with such a whimper of a showdown as Phoebe discovers that with a copper conductor on the back of her proton pack and a steady breath of fire from Nadim, then she is able to apprehend and defeat Garaka. Even though Garaka is captured and sealed into the ghost chamber in the basement of the firehouse, the rest of New York is now under siege for the 40 years worth of ghosts that were trapped underneath the HQ. With all the new advancements of gadgets that Winston has been working on and the new emergence of the total spectral breakout, Ghostbusters 5, I think we're going to be calling it, maybe Ghostbusters 6, it's going to have a lot of potential to work with. I'm really interested in seeing where they go from here. Now, one other character that needs to improve heading into the next movie is definitely Trevor, played by Finn Wolfhard. Every single time I see this actor on screen in something other than Stranger Things, I get annoyed by him. Not because of his physical appearance, but because it looks like the dude isn't trying. In this movie in particular, Trevor has taken a major backseat with little to no material to work with. He's perhaps the most underwhelming and mediocre aspect of the entire movie. Trevor isn't funny, charismatic, or shows any real on-screen chemistry with anyone in this film, which is especially discouraging since they built up his relationship with Celeste O'Connor's Lucky in the previous movie, and they did nothing with them in this movie. In fact, I would argue that Celeste O'Connor's character takes a backseat to Winston's new protege, Lars Pinfield, played by James Acaster. I think Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, it's a fine Frozen family film that doesn't go out of its way to make audiences feel like the movie is separating itself too far from the source material, but it doesn't take any risks when it comes to creative expression. It is a by-the-book sort of adventure through New York City, and if you're patient with it, you'll find some good moments in between all the yuck. Do I find the movie to be a disaster like some people have told me that they thought it was? No, I don't think so. In fact, a close friend of mine even wrote to me to say that he walked out of the movie after Phoebe turned into a ghost. I don't think it's a disaster, but it's pretty much in line with everything we've seen from Sony Pictures recently. It's definitely better than Morbius, Uncharted. It's probably better than Kraven the Hunter. We'll see soon. And it's absolutely better than Madam Web. So take that for what you will. But my final review score of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is a very meh 2.5 out of 5. Let's turn things over to our filmmaking factoid segment, a moment in the show where we go over some of the behind-the-scenes magic that went into making this picture come to life. This is Act 3, Beyond the Final Scene. Across the board, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is getting an icy reception from critics, ending with a 44% rotten rating on the website. The critic consensus says Ghostbusters Frozen Empire offers a certain amount of nostalgia-fueled fun for fans of the original, but a crowded cast and surprisingly serious tone prevent the sequel from truly sparking. Audiences, like usual, are more receptive of this movie, giving Ghostbusters Frozen Empire an 84% positive score. One audience member, Jeremy, cites it as a nostalgic storyline. Quite a different direction, but very similar to Vigo. There were parts of the movie which did come across as truly scary. I appreciated this change in tone along with the humor. I'm still not sure how this family dynamic will play out over time, but this new iteration definitely needs to continue and expand the universe. The horror elements are what really makes a Ghostbusters movie different from any other kind of Hollywood cookie-cutter rehash. Jurassic Park took away the horrific element, and now it's a stale CGI slog with no characters and no meaning behind them. I would hate to see Ghostbusters go that route. This movie gets very close to doing that, but thankfully there are some moments that pull it back into the range of the originals, and I'm thankful for that. Now that we've seen what the audience and critics have to say about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, let's take a look at some filmmaking factoids and call it a day. When Gary says he picked out a film for movie night, he holds up a VHS copy of Cannibal Girls from 1973. This was the second feature film directed by Ivan Reitman, who directed the first two Ghostbusters films. He's also listed as a producer on this film, which is dedicated to him. The title Cannibal Girls can also be seen on a movie theater marquee in both Ghostbusters 2 from 1989 and Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021. Now, the old lady ghost that Ray sees in the New York City Library in the first movie is the same exact one we see here. That was a really nice callback, and it still creeps me out when I see it. Now, did you guys know that Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is the first Ghostbusters film in this original canon that has failed to mention Dana Barrett, and to the point that she isn't even directly mentioned by the characters? The only reference to her are posters outside the library, which are visible before the possessor animates one of the lion statues. It advertises a concert performance by cellist Dana Barrett. It's very small, you'll definitely miss it, but it's the only callback to Sigourney Weaver's character that we see in this film. Now for my last filmmaking factoid. The possessor ghost can be a reference to another entity the Ghostbusters faced in the animated series, where an electric-based ghost can possess electronic appliances and manage in a moment to get control of the Ecto-1 to attack the Ghostbusters, just like it happens in this movie. Really cool moment in this movie when he possesses the Ecto-1, the lights turn red, and it almost looks like that one movie, Christine. I really enjoyed that reference. Now, throughout this episode, I hardly touched on the new ghost in the film, but that possessor ghost is a real piece of shit. I think the possessor ghost is more of a villain in this film than Garaka is, if I'm honest. There are actually a couple really neat ghosts that they have trapped in the aquarium. I really like that one that was hunched over with the large jagged teeth. It looked like it was ripped out of a horror film, and I hope that they do something with that in a follow-up movie, because that ghost was actually probably the scariest part of the entire movie. I want to see more of it. And with that, my friends, we call it a wrap on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Be sure to support the channel by leaving a like and a view on the video review over on the YouTube channel. I can use a bit more love there. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss a video or a podcast episode. Next week, we'll venture from one empire to the next with Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. Thank you for listening to the show. Now go catch a movie.